Well, hello everyone. Trying to see how many people we have joined. I'm not sure I can see that at the moment, but we're going to just take a few minutes while everyone gets logged on and I think what I'd like to do, since this is a dad's webinar, is while everyone's getting situated, one, we're going to put a poll up just to answer a few questions about you and why you're here in this webinar today. And your entertainment while you get to take the poll is that all of us have prepared a handful of dad jokes that we're going to share since this is a dad's webinar. So we'll throw that poll up now, and I'll let the guys. We shared a few of these earlier, and there's a few really good ones. So why don't we start with y'all?
Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? It's just too tired. Too tired.
I'm dying. I'm
Thank,
dying.
thank you, Jason.
What do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef.
What do you call a fish wearing a bow tie? Sophisticated.
Oh, ho, 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 ho.
Thank you.
Can't a nose be 12 inches long? Because then it would be a foot.
Very true.
My wife told me I had to stop impersonating a flamingo, so I had to put my foot down. So if you're just joining and you're wondering if this is the meat of the dad's adoption webinar, we're just giving everybody a few minutes to get on. We got a poll that's up. If you're just now joining, answer that poll, and here in about a minute, we'll look at the results of that. And in the meantime, we've got one more minute for dad jokes. So throw as many out as you can.
A pony walks into a noisy bar and tries to order a beer. Bartender says, I can't hear you. You'll have to speak up. Pony says, sorry, I'm a little hoarse.
That's good.
I used to play piano by ear, but now I use my hands.
Uh,
As a penguin built its house, it glues it together.
Look, a great book about anti-gravity. It was impossible to put down.
That's good.
All right, let's get two more, and then we'll jump in.
What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. Thank you.
Why do fathers take an extra pair of socks when they go golfing?
Oh, I know this one.
In case they get a hole in one.
Ah, there we go.
All right, we'll end on that one, and
Not my
let's
best.
we'll close the poll and look at these results.
Ah,
Um, and just FYI, as that's polling, we have a Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. You should see a button for Q&A. If you don't see it, click on the three buttons that says more, and you should see the Q&A box. And we'll do a Q&A at the end, but feel free to send those questions in as we go, and we'll take a look at them and try to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. I do see the poll results here. What best describes your connection to adoption? So I've got a lot of folks here who are home study approved or just considering the process. So this is a great place
yeah.
for y'all to be. What are you most hoping to get out of today's webinar? Hearing real adoption stories from dads who've been there. That is the title of our webinar. So that's a great answer to the question. Encouragement for the adoption journey. My wife we did get one person. Okay, that's fine. We had the a ladies webinar a few weeks ago, and I thought I have a feeling that a few dads might just get roped into this, and that's okay too. So we're glad you're here. Let me jump right in. We start not at the very end, though. So this is the Dude You Can Adopt webinar hosted by Both Hands, real talk and practical insights from dads who've been there. My name is Matthew Enoch. I'm going to be the host today. And then we have Marty, Andy, and JT. I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and just tell everybody what you do, your connection to adoption, your adoption story, the type of adoption that you went through, and just anything else that you'd want to share that would kind of give some context as to why you're here and why why you've been there. So Marty, I'll let you go first.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. So I'm Marty Schwieterman. I'm the family pastor at Fellowship Bible Church in Brentwood, Tennessee. It's a couple miles south of Nashville. And my entrance into adoption was actually around 2003. We as a church decided to host a conference about adoption. And I ended up being the organizer on the church side. And I can remember pulling together some families in our congregation who had adopted. And in that very first meeting, I knew that God was starting to knock on the door of my own heart. I actually went home that night and told my wife, our goose is cooked, because I was over 40 years old at that time already. And we already had three kids, and they were at various ages. And the idea of adopting was not necessarily in my plan. But man, when the Spirit of God hits you up alongside of the head, you got to pay attention. And so I paid attention, and my wife and I attended this conference. We participated. We started talking to more people who had adopted, and it just became clear that it was our next step. But it did create in my wife and I the biggest argument probably we've ever had, and that was I wanted to adopt through foster care, and she wanted to adopt through from China. She wanted a baby girl from China. And to be honest, I wanted to adopt from foster care because the state would pay all the fees, and China was going to be expensive. I admit, I confess. Um, well, my wife won, and we adopted our daughter in 2007 from China. And I've been very active. As a church, we've helped hundreds of people, hundreds of couples adopt. We've been involved in statewide um, campaigns around foster care and adoption. We've helped launch nonprofits. We've done exactly what we're doing here, and that is help people take their next step and to kind of answer the questions and take away the fear that's involved in adoption. So,
JT, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. I am JT Olson. I live in Brentwood, and I'm the president and founder of Both Hands Foundation. I'm not sure how many of you understand or know about Both Hands. Just briefly to explain it and how it started, you'll get it in a couple minutes. I was doing a fundraiser for Bethany Christian Services where you send letters out and say, sponsor me while I golf. And I had a buddy who I was in a Bible study with, sends my letter back to me, doesn't include a check. He just took a magic marker and he scribbled across my letter. He said, JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you. But you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money. And that was the aha light bulb idea. And whenever I saw a 5K or a golf tournament after that, I kept thinking there's got to be a better way. And a couple years later, a friend of mine was adopting 4 kids from Moldova. He needed to raise a lot of money. He had no idea how he's going to do it. And I said, we should try this. So we recruited some friends. We found a widow in Nashville who needed help. We got all the supplies donated from local merchants because they all loved the idea. And then the whole team, we all sent letters out to people and said, just what my buddy said, would you sponsor me while I work in this widow's house? And we spent the day working, and people sent money in. And when it was all over, said and done with, by the time everything had trickled in, we'd raised over $70,000. And that was the first stab at doing a Both Hands project. Now we've done 1,676 projects in 46 states. Hawaii will be doing one August 1st, so we'll soon say 47 states. And we've raised over $26 million for families and organizations to use for adoption and other foster care initiatives and things like that. And my adoption story, it's kind of on both ends. I grew up on a farm in northeastern Iowa. Um, there was five of us kids. One weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their wedding anniversary, and on their way home from that vacation, they were killed in a car accident. And so I am aware of what it's like to be an orphan. I know what it's like to wonder what's going to happen to us. Can we all stay together? Uh, but I also know what it's like to be rescued, because my aunt and uncle, who were 33 years old at the time and had three children, took all five of us in. So I know what it's like to have someone, maybe like yourself, coming in and say, "Hey, we got this. We'll take this over." So I know adoption from that side of the story. And in 2003, we adopted a little girl from China, Gracie. She's now 24 years old, and she's been the joy of our life. We have five kids, four bio, one chosen, and Gracie's the youngest one. So that's our connection to the adoption world.
Awesome. Andy, I know a little bit of your story, but I'd love for you to share it with everybody.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Andy Whisenant, and I get to work as part of the Both Hands team in our marketing group. So we get to help tell the story of what God's doing through families who are adopting and in the process. And it is highly personal for me because my wife and I did our own Both Hands project a couple of years ago to raise the funds that we needed for our adoption, and we didn't have to pay a penny out of pocket. So it actually works, which is amazing. Um, for my wife and I, we both, even before we started dating, adoption was something that God kind of had moved our hearts towards just as we were singles as well. So when we started dating, we were kind of nervous to bring up the conversation of, I think I'd like to adopt one day, but what do you think? But when we started having those conversations of what would our family look like in the future as we build out this life together, we were both really in agreement on that, and I think that was God's grace to us with that. So it wasn't really a question of if, but more so when. We had a son biologically, and then a couple years after that, we just really felt God telling us it was time to go and start the process, knowing that there was going to be a wait involved probably. Um, Ours was a little bit unconventional process in terms of timing and the path that we took to get there, but we ended up in a domestic special needs adoption program through an agency that I will talk about for forever. They are so wonderful. But we got to meet our little girl Maya about 2.5 years ago. And she is about 2.5. So we met her when she was about a week old, and have been on a unique journey with her through that. And it is one that adoption is unlike anything else that you've ever experienced. And if you're in the home study process or if you're waiting, I think you kind of understand that feeling of, wow, this is different. This is a unique experience that only a few people understand. And so I hope that you feel seen and heard and like, oh, me too kind of feelings through our conversation today, because you're not alone in the process. And our goal is to help you find that community and find some answers. Maybe not solutions, but maybe find some answers and some I've been there too kind of feelings too.
Right. Well, my name is Matthew Enoch. I'm the finance and operations director at Both Hands. My wife and I, we got married. We're about to celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary, and we had talked about adopting early on while we were dating, and it was always something we said we'd love to do that someday. And about 4 years into marriage, getting pregnant was just not something that it seemed like God was going to allow to happen. And so we said, well, we said we wanted to adopt, and maybe this is God letting us know that the time is now. We'd always said, well, after we have a few biologically of our own, then we'll look at that. But I think God had something else in mind, and we entered the process in 2019. We waited for about a year and a half, and we adopted our son, Gabriel. He was born in 2021 in Tennessee, where we live in just outside of Nashville. Um, and he is now 4.5. And then a year ago, our daughter, Mercy Ellen, we adopted her. She was born in Jacksonville. So two domestic adoptions. One we went through an agency, and the other we went through an attorney. Two very, very different experiences. So I kind of am able to look at it from both of those angles. But God just knew um, that He had our boy and our girl in mind for us at the time that He uh, allotted. So we waited a long time. It was a hard wait, but we trusted God's timing. I wouldn't say we trusted it every moment, but looking back, we knew that God was in all of it and He was sovereign over all of it. Um, and so we're thrilled to have both of our children home. Um, I do want to, we're going to jump into some more specific questions. I do want to just make sure everybody knows we're going to, toward the end, get into some of the practical things into related to funding. I know a lot of men have that question. That's a question that I get anytime we go to a conference or we're talking to couples. The women have their set of questions and the men have theirs. And so a lot of times they overlap, but a lot of times the men are really looking at that financial question. So I promise we are going to come to that, but I know there are other things that are concerns as well. And I wanted to make sure we touched on all of it. So as we jump through, just a reminder, you can go ahead and put your Q&A questions, and we'll come to those toward the end. But I think a great question to ask the panel is, why did you say yes? I know we touched on some of that, but what is it that made you get over that hump of, I don't know if this is what God wants me to do, or maybe it wasn't a question of what God wants. It might have just been a question of, I never dreamed that I would be going down this path. What was it that got you to the place where you're like, you know what, I'm gonna put my foot forward and take the next step. This is popcorn. I'll let any of y'all answer as you.
Go ahead,
So,
Mark.
well, I was just thinking about that conference I was talking about that we hosted, and there was a song out at that time by Stephen Curtis Chapman, and I think it was Cinderella or like Who Will Take Me In, or it was something like that. And they had a video playing of where all these children were being adopted, and and it was like children alone on a beach or children alone on a playground, and all of a sudden, a parent would show up and take that child into their arms. And it was clearly a picture of adoption. And then the video ended with this little toddler crawling up, and you see the big feet of a man, and he climbs up the pants leg of a man, and he's looking up. And then what your heart is yearning to see is that father reaching down for that child. And everything in my being was saying, pick him up, pick him up, you know? And what I realized was that God was telling me to pick him up, pick him up. And it affected me so strongly. It was like the Spirit of God was just saying, Marty, I have chosen you for this path. And it is smack dab in the middle of your heart right now. So it was so obvious to me. I came with my own fears and wondering about money and wondering about my age and things like that. But I'll tell you, when God confirmed that in my heart to such a degree, I just knew somewhere in the world was a child that I haven't met yet, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my story.
I think for my wife and I, we both grew up in homes where we were very blessed with knowing we were loved. It was like Mayberry for both of us. Our parents were together, they loved each other. Um, they taught us who Jesus was. And we had that stable foundation to spring off into life with. And we always knew that, no matter how bad the day had been, we could always come home. And that was always a safe place to land. And it wasn't until we both had had some opportunities to travel and do some international mission trips that we saw, we'd always heard the numbers and the statistics on orphan care crisis and kids without homes. And it's, a totally different conversation if you're talking domestic versus international adoption. And those both have their own unique experiences to both. But we met kids who were behind those numbers. We knew the names that were assigned to those numbers. And the idea that a child either, halfway around the world or just down the street, might grow up without knowing the love of a family, just it I think it birthed something in us that was like, this is not right. And it was a moment of, now that we've seen, we're responsible in some way, to do something, not out of guilt, not out of any kind of guilt, but to say, I have experienced the love of the Father to such an extent that I can't help but share that with someone else. And to do that for a child that needs a safe place to land. We had the home, we had the place for them to be. And so for us, that was our, we didn't know all the steps that would be included with that, before we said yes. But for us, that was our stepping stone into that of, we don't know what the future holds, but we know who's already in the future and who already knows the child that he wants to be in our home. And he has proven himself time and time again. So how would he not prove himself in this too? Was kind of our yes moment, to adoption.
I'll say, coming at it from the angle of infertility, we see that a lot at both ends with the families that we work with. We always ask them what led you to adoption, and increasingly we're seeing that that is the answer is we've not been able to have children on our own. And I think there's a temptation to feel like you have to say, well, it was my idea all along. It wasn't just, because we couldn't have children biologically. But I think it's okay to just for that to be the answer sometimes. We had talked about adoption, but I do think that it was. I remember. I don't have the date in mind, but I remember I was at work and my wife had texted me something, and it was just a health update while we were in the process of trying. And it was, the sixth or seventh time in a row that it was just this is not going to happen. And it was almost like a gut punch that led me to Googling how much does adoption cost? And I think that's okay to live in that and just say, what, maybe this wasn't my first choice, but it's where God's leading me. And I think God leads a lot of people to look into adoption through the grief of infertility. There's a lot of grief for our spouses, but for men too, there's a lot of grief that's involved in walking through infertility. And I think we have to be able to say that that's okay. I think you have to be careful how you word that, especially when you're talking to your children later in life. And so that can be dicey, but if there's any shame wrapped up in the thought that I didn't really consider adoption until um, until we found out that we couldn't have children of our own, I think that's an okay thing to sit with. I also think it's okay if it was your wife's idea, and she had to strong arm you to join this webinar today, or if you're still not sold on it, I think that's an okay thing. There's no shame in the process that God takes to get people over that hump, to believing that that's something that they should step into.
When I think of the question, why did you say yes? And I think most stories are like this, but mine, it doesn't happen overnight. I think my journey into this started when we were married. We've been married 42 years now, but the first few years we were diagnosed as infertile, and so we kind of looked into the adoption. But then we had a baby, and 3 years later we had another baby, and a couple years later we had another one, and then we had four. And in the process in the 90s, I think there was 4 or 5 women that we invited to stay at our house because I'm kind of a fan of life being a former fetus myself. I'm pretty sold out on life and doing everything we can to protect it. And so these women who were going to have abortions, we had them stay at our house, and the option was always, well, we'll adopt this baby. And so a couple times we got pregnant during the process. So, I'm living with two pregnant women, and and the mom always ended up wanting to parent, but we were exposed to adoption that way. And then I had a job change. I didn't travel much, and because again my belief in life and the importance of it, I joined the board of Bethany Christian Services. And because of that, our history with adoption and unplanned pregnancies and all this other stuff, we were in and around adoption all over the place. I mean, everyone we talked to on the board and the fundraisers we went to, we'd see people who adopted 3 or 4 people. I mean, we were all over it. And then I had changed jobs, and we really weren't, I hadn't built the business up yet. We were getting much of an income. And, I would go to these Bethany meetings, and I'd come back after a meeting, and my wife would say, well, how was the meeting? And I'd say, well, it was good. We did this, we did that, we did that. And there's 2 babies down at the Baptist Hospital in the neonatal unit. She said, oh, let's go see them. And I would say, why? She said, well, maybe we can adopt them. I said, honey, we can't adopt. We don't have any, I mean, no money's coming in, everything's going out. We'd have to go into our life savings. Do you want to go into our life savings? And that would kind of quiet her down. And then another month would go by, and I'd talk about adoption because my friends were adopting. Her friends were, obviously we were all over it. I'd come back from a meeting, and she'd say, how was the meeting? And unsuspectingly, I would fall right into that trap and say, oh, it was good. We did this, we did that. We got a fundraiser coming up, blah, blah, blah. And there's a baby down at Southern Hills. Let's go see it. And I said, no, I said, do you want to go into our life savings? We can't do that. And at one point, my wife told me this, I will never forget. She said, listen, we have 4 people, we have 4 kids in this family who'd love to have another baby brother or sister. He said, I've got 4 kids. I'd love to have another one. I'm happy with 4. I'd be just as happy with 5. She said, there's only one person in this family who's not on board with adoption, and that's you. So he said, you can talk to your friends about it, talk to everyone else. But, when you're ready, and I can't take the up, I can take a yes or a no. I can't take the up and down. She said, so when you're ready, let me know. And then every night I'm putting the kids to bed, and they're saying, dear God, please let us have a new baby's brother or sister, So, I mean, and so it's Christmas Eve, 2001, about 11 o'clock at night. I'm headed to the attic to get the stockings to hang by the chimney with care, because that's my job. And I go up into the attic, and I look around, and I see a stroller, and I see a high chair, and I see a crib. And the thought hits me, we've got everything we need to raise another child. And then the second thought hits me, what's wrong with using a life savings to save a life? Mm. And it was like in the attic. Some people say their father takes me to the woodshed. My father took me to the attic. He exposed all my fears, my doubts, the envy I have. I don't have any money. All those fears. I was just laid bare, and I just said, we can do this. I walked down the stairs. I grabbed the stockings, walked downstairs. My wife was coming up. I said, honey, we've got a high chair, we got a crib, we got strollers, and she thought I was going to say, it's time for a yard sale. Let's get rid of this stuff. But I looked at her and I said, we've got everything we need. What's wrong with using a life savings to save a life? And she said, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm serious. She said, can I tell the kids? Yeah. And that next morning, all our kids got a note in their stocking that they were going to be a big brother, a big sister. And I mean, on December 26th, let me tell you, my wife was on it like a dog on a pork chop. She was calling. It was like boom, boom, boom. And, by the first week in January, we were set, boom, boom, boom. The process was in motion, and we were not sure where to adopt from, but we ended up adopting from China because honestly, and there's a whole great story about that. Because that's where Gracie was. That's why we went to China. But kids in China at that time were not faring well, and we thought we could do that. So why did I say yes? That's a long answer to your question, but it's a long process for me, and I'm so glad I said yes.
That's one I love that story every time I've heard it, JT.
Mm.
Um, I think this would be a great time to just talk about what it was that made you most nervous, or yeah, what were you most afraid of going into the process, or maybe even after you started the process? We have several people joined who have already had their home study approved, so they've already said yes. What's the fear that they're feeling right now, having been in that stage, or for the folks that are still thinking about it, what's the fear? And I think one of the things that we want to make sure we do is validate those fears, because I think that there's a lot of things that men in particular are afraid to say out loud that they're afraid of. And I think that all of us have been in that situation where we have a thought and we're like, I don't want anyone to know that I thought this.
Yeah.
But so what are some of those things?
I think one thing that pops up that I remember thinking and reading about and talking to the dads, and that is, can I love this child as much as my bio kids? And I just think that's a common one. And I think for in our situation, I think my kids would all the four at the bio would say, "You love Gracie more." She may have favored status, but I got her wrapped around my little finger. Uh, but that was probably one of mine. But
Yeah.
Well, and to piggyback on that too, like, will my child like me? Will my child love me back? Because I think that you can love this little person um, with everything you have, but attachment is a real question sometimes. Are they, especially depending on their history, how old they are when you adopt them, what they have experienced already in their short little lives. Um, they're carrying a lot of things. They are carrying a lot of trauma. They're carrying a lot of experiences, maybe that no little person should have in a perfect scenario. But for a lot of things, it might take a minute for that child to want to get a big hug from you, or to feel safe and to feel comfortable with you being their safe person. We've had our daughter for 2.5 years now, and there are still moments where we realize, oh, we're still having to earn your trust about this or that. And it's small things of even subtle trauma that she may have experienced in the NICU, that, oh man, something is encoded in your mind still, that something's not safe. And it is our job to show up every day to say, yes, you are safe and you are loved and you are cared for. But to know that that won't always be the case, but there's not a definite timeline on when the warm fuzzy feelings might be there. And so that's, we have these pictures of adoption where, the a child just running to their parents with open arms. And is that awesome when that happens? Sure. But there may be times where they're just the connection they need is for you to sit with them in a meltdown, and for them to know and to be reminded often that, man, these are my safe people and I can trust them, and that even if I'm testing the boundaries by whatever behavior, that behavior is communication of I need to be assured that and so it's okay if you don't feel like a Hallmark Christmas card, right away with your adopted child. It is in those moments, I think, of the wrestling with and the tension of the hard things, that they experience what love really is with us. So don't take heart and don't worry that you're doing the wrong thing, because sometimes it just looks like being there and showing up.
Yeah, I'll say the two big questions, the fears that I had. One was financial. I was working in ministry at the time, still working in ministry. That was just not something where like JT said, we didn't even have a life savings to consider to throw at this. And I thought, if we take out debt or do something crazy and then it all falls apart, What's going to happen? Are we ever going to be able to walk through that process again? And another fear, I think, that I didn't really even think about until we were in the process, was, and I think all of us could probably relate to this because we've all adopted children of a different race. We're all white men, and we've adopted children who are not white. And there are, just wondering what they're going to think about that when they get older and they start to notice, and what other people are going to think and say about that, what relatives are going to say. And we've already had to walk through that with some relatives, where they say something and it's like, you can't say that. You can't say it that way. I understand your intent, but that's not, you can't say that in front of my child. And so those are things that, you have to
Yeah.
be prepared for. And sometimes you just can't be prepared for it. But that was something that made me nervous going into the process.
For me, I had two things. One was finances, when I started thinking about, Lord, can I trust you with my finances for this adoption? I mean, it was just the obvious answer was yes. But I will tell you, it was so faith building. We did not ask one person to give to us, but I think all of our adoption finances were actually donated by people anonymously and some family and friends and so forth, that just came out of the blue. And it was amazing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
what a testimony, to God's faithfulness and my wife's faith. I was the one dragging my feet on that whole thing. But then the other thing that I was afraid of was my age. I was 48 years old, and I was like, and I already looked like Santa Claus when I was 48. And and I had two dear friends. It was JT and Sarah Olson, and we went to a Starbucks, and they asked me the same question, like, what am I afraid of? And I thought, it's my age. And JT said something that just changed me forever. And he said, an old dad's better than no dad. And it was like faith jumped across that table and just went straight down my neck into my chest. And I just thought, I have nothing to be afraid of. It's like in an instant, all my fears were gone.
Yeah.
And I just said, well, here we go, and um, Matthew, what's ironic is that I did adopt a girl from China and I am a white man, but I am actually darker than she is. So that's kind of funny to me.
Well, I want to, and there's a great question in the chat that I want to get to, here in a minute. I just briefly, in light of all of those things that were concerning to you, now being on the other side, what has adoption actually been like? What are the things that I think we can all speak to these things that you were afraid of going in that turned out to not be fears at all, but things that maybe as you went through it, became, oh, if I had known that this was even a possibility, I would have been very afraid of that. But maybe God protected you from that fear. But just how you're walking through that, and what's it been like on the other side of adopting?
For my wife and I, we're both very type A when it comes to like organizational kind of things. Like we love a good spreadsheet, we love a good schedule, we love a good calendar, color coded preferably, like we love to have our ducks in a row. And that serves us really well in a lot of areas of our life. It helps me do my job. It helps me, keep a schedule going. It helped us in our home study process. Like our social workers kind of tried to slow walk us into it. Now we're going to start some paperwork now. It's going to look like a lot, but don't freak out. And we were like, say less. This is our moment to shine. Like this is where we earn our gold star is in the paperwork process. And so we plowed through that, and then we had to wait, and the waiting was killer. Um, we don't expect to wait that long. And, we would hear stories of families matching the day after they were approved by their home study. Like, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? We can just move on with this process. Um, and as much of a planner as I am, I realized how much that is an idol in my life, that having that white knuckle control on my life, my family's next steps, how much I was hanging on to that, and how little I lived with open hands. Um, and so I think it was something that I didn't realize. We went into this process to say we're going to love this child so much. We're going to care for them. We're going to provide a safe home for them to grow up in, which, yes, we want to do those things. But my goodness, I didn't realize how it would shape my faith in the process personally, that God would expose some things in me and my heart that were lurking in there that had not been tested to this point, and he was going to refine those things and still is. And there are still days where I just my most frequent prayer lately has been, God help, and that's it. That's all I know to say some days. um, but I think I have seen him in a clearer way because of our daughter, that I see his goodness and his grace and his mercy and his love. Oh my goodness. You will see the gospel come alive in your living room, in ways that
Yes.
you never
Yes.
thought possible. And it will, yes, you will invest in the life of a child, but man, you will see God in brand new ways, in degrees that you never thought possible. So that was a surprise and oh man, this is different than I thought kind of moment for us.
I think when I think what has adoption been like, I think adopting Gracie was probably one of the most important things we've done as a family. I mean, it's taught my kids things, and yeah, we had a lot of attachment disorder. Boy, that first year, that was challenging, and thought goes to your head, what have I done to my family? And but I just it does make you press into God. It makes you press in to the Savior. It's like when we're talking about finances, we're what God likes, what He favors, He funds. You know, I mean, the money is going to come through somehow. But what stands out, one thing that stands out, I remember when we first got her, she took a liking to my son Nick first and didn't like any of the rest of us. Eventually she got all the other siblings, and then she liked my wife. But I mean, we're still 2, 3 months home, and she doesn't like me. If she has a choice to pick anyone else but me, she'll go to somebody else. And what it taught me, I still remember it so well. I thought, that's how God feels about me when I don't choose him. He's sitting there going, his open arms, he's providing for me. He's going, I got everything you need. Just come to me. And yet we go, no, I'm going to run over here. And I remember it was one day in the yard. My neighbor was there, and a couple of my kids were there. We were playing in the yard, and Gracie fell, skinned her knee or something. She started crying, and she came to me. And my neighbor looked at me, what? She knew what was happening. Other kids go, Dad, Dad, and it was like she chose me. And I thought, that's what adoption has taught me. It's running to my father's arms instead of someplace else.
Mm.
We have some great questions in the Q&A, and I want to make sure we have time to get to those. Marty, I didn't want to. Was there anything you wanted to share?
I just say that, I came into adoption thinking I was going to be saving someone. I was going to be like the cavalry coming up over the hill
Yeah.
to save someone. And what really has happened through adoption is I've been transformed from the inside out. Living every day with a little person in your life that you are centered on, attaching with them, loving them, helping them regulate themselves and learn. It's been one of the greatest treasures that has just transformed me. It's transformed my marriage. It's transformed our other kids. It's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah.
Now, was it always easy? No, no. It is sometimes excruciatingly hard. Um, but is it worth it? 100%. Absolutely. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, one
It,
thought
it's
that
been
I
hard.
had.
It's been hard raising my bio kids too sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
Yes.
I had thought that kids are still kids,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
one of the things that our adoption agency, when we went through with our son, told us to always keep in mind is adoption is not an identity. My son is not an adopted child. Adoption is something that happened to him,
Mhm.
and that's uh, you know, in all the good and difficult ways, that is that you have to look at it that way. Um, I love how much of a picture of the gospel adoption is. I
Mhm.
always say if, 1,000 years from now, they dig me and my family up, they'll never know that any of us were related. And I'm like, what a great way to think of the gospel. There's nothing that holds believers together except the gospel itself, and adoption is what holds our family together. I know that a lot of the fears that people have are around finances, so I wanted to make sure I took at least a few minutes to cover that. Um, so uh, First, I want to talk about both hands. Let me go back. Obviously, this is hosted by Both Hands. JT, Andy, and I all work with Both Hands, and Marty we have a great relationship with Marty, and he's very familiar and has been a great support and help to us at Both Hands as well. If you don't know what Both Hands is, JT described it a little bit early on in his journey, but effectively, what we do is we help families fundraise for adoptions by serving a widow. So we live out both sides of James 1:27. So a family will put together a team of volunteers. They'll go to a widow's home and they'll fix up her lawn. They'll paint the inside of the room. They'll clean out her gutters. We typically don't, you know, suggest families do anything crazy. They're not replacing the roof. They're not doing anything that requires pulling a permit. Um, but it's a way to show up at a widow's house with 15, 20, 25 people and love on her for a day. And then everybody who serves on the project sends letters out to their friends and families saying, would you sponsor me for the day while I work on this widow's house? So just like JT talked about a golf fundraiser. So it's just like that, or a 5K, except instead of running around a track, we're serving a widow. And so all of the funds that come in through that project, Both Hands facilitates all of that. We have a team that coaches people all the way through the process. We've done this. JT, tell me the number, 1,600, and he's muted, but I heard him through the wall 1,676 times.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay. Uh, and it works. Um, the average family raises $23,000. That's the average over the last several years. Andy, y'all did a project and raised close to that amount, I believe, a
$30,000.
little more.
Yeah.
30,000, yeah. My wife and I, for our second adoption for our daughter, we raised $55,000 with Both Hands. Um, and it's so much fun. It seems a little daunting at first, but every time a family goes through this, they come on the other end, they just say, thank you, thank you, thank you. One, because it helps them get their child home and it helps them to do it debt free. But also because it's a way to live out the gospel in that process. I'll say it's something to do while you're waiting. It's something to put your hands to and get dirty, like I said, it's a lot of fun and it's a huge blessing. And we're still very close with the widow that we served. So that's what Both Hands does. And of course, feel free to ask any questions about that in the chat. Um,
And I'll say too, every single penny that's donated towards your Both Hands project goes towards your adoption expenses. So we
that's
don't
great.
anything out for overhead or administration or processing. We fundraise completely separately for that. So every penny that someone donates towards your project, you can assure them that that is helping you bring your child home, which
Yeah.
is unlike other nonprofits. Not that I'm biased or anything, but it is a unique feature of what we're able to do because of friends and donors who support Both Hands.
And we've raised over 26 million since we started.
Yeah.
$26 million. And I'll say too on the back end, because I handle all of the disbursements. Um, we have a small team, but we're very usually very quick in terms of, adoption happens fast. I think, with our son, we waited for 18 months and then we had 6 days notice. And sometimes you got to get the funds together real fast. And so our team is very on it. We're very broad in terms of what kind of adoption expenses can be covered. So there's a lot of ins and outs of that I'd love to answer if anybody has any questions. And if we run out of time with the Q&A, you're always welcome to email any of us and we can answer those questions as well. Just one quick thing too that I wanted to touch on is this adoption calculator. This is sort of being beta tested right now, and so we don't have this available for y'all to use, but just so you know that it exists, and we're gonna if we have all your contact information, we'll send this out to you once it's ready. But let me just show you quickly how this works. I'm assuming y'all can still see my screen. But if you're going through that adoption process, especially if you're on the very beginning stage and you're thinking, I don't even know how much this is going to cost. I don't know what grants are available. Let's say, we see an average 50,000 is kind of a normal amount. We've seen them high or low, but let's say you're told that your adoption is going to cost $50,000. You can go through this calculator. Let's say, yeah, I've received a grant from Shoho, one of our partners. I've received a grant from Life Songs, another one of our partners. You can change these numbers if the numbers are different for you. Let's say we haven't done any other fundraisers, and we don't really want to pull from savings unless we absolutely have to. Let's just assume we're not going to pull from savings. So see my plan. We've got $7,000 to go. That's assuming that you do a both hands project and you raise the average amount. But as we know, if you raise as much as Andy did, there you go. You're all the way there, and you haven't touched your savings. You haven't even dipped into the federal adoption tax credit, which is also part of this calculator. That's a little more complicated, and that's something we always advise that people talk to their accountant about. But there is the adoption tax credit that's up to $17,000 per child, and all of that depends on income and other things. But this is a really cool tool that we're working on now, and so we'll share that with you as soon as it's officially ready to be shared. I want to make sure we get to some of these questions. So I've seen a few in the chat. I love this one. And JT, I think this would be a great one for you to answer. It says, what's it like adopting a sibling group? What are some of the things to consider bringing multiple children into the home? I know you didn't adopt a sibling group, but based on your story, I feel like you'd have a great answer to this question.
And Marty's probably seen so many cases like this too. He'd have some input, but honestly, I think it's well, clearly you need to make sure. It depends on where they're coming from. Are they coming from a tragic car accident? Are they coming from, it depends on what their background is. It also depends on their age. I mean, if you're adopting a 15 and 16-year-old and you've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, that's a different scenario than if you've got teenagers and you're adopting a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So there's not one answer to this question, but I think you need to make sure you're prepared. And I think nowadays, I mean, we were taken in 1969. Back then, there was no counseling. No one ever talked about it or anything like that. We just kept going. And of course, it's, my aunt and uncle were German descent, so that adds that to that. So you just keep you soldier up and keep going. But I would say some strong counseling, but you have to really look at where they are in the age in the family, and that makes a difference. It's a lot longer answer to that, but I don't have time. There's other
sure.
I want to make sure we get to, but that's my Marty, you got anything to add to that?
Oh, I was just thinking about, trying to keep siblings together is really the goal.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's where, couples with no kids at all who have a few years on them, sibling groups are perfect for them. So if you don't have any other kids in the home, for you to foster or adopt a sibling group, where they're the focus of your attention, and it sometimes makes the best sense. But that requires someone who's actually open to doing that kind of ministry,
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris asks,
but at conferences, we do meet people. I mean, I remember meeting this couple. They were 55 years old. They came up to the table talking about their kids. They had a 28-year-old, a 30-year-old, 32-year-old. I said, what are you doing here at this adoption conference? Well, we adopted a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old. We took the sibling group in. And these are heroes. These are people who just stepped up and said, yeah, they said we tried retirement, we didn't like it. And we wanted to make a difference. And it just reminds me, are we here to seek ease or are we trying to seek an impact? And those are the kind of people that ah, they wow me. Sorry, get carried away.
I'm with you, JT.
Um, Chris asked, how did you address the questions from families or strangers asking about your kid's race? Do those questions become infrequent as the child grows older? I think that's another hard one, depending on where you live and what your family history is like. We live in Middle Tennessee. There's enough diversity here that I think a lot of times people don't ask that question. More or less, we get questions from not really questions so much as just comments or certain words or phrases that have gone out of style, maybe to put it lightly. And it's usually from older folks, and you have to approach it with a little bit of grace. But one thing that I always think about is if they say something to me that's inappropriate, that's one thing, and I can, address it one way. But if they ever say something in front of my son, as much as I'm a people pleaser and don't want to cause a stir, I have to say something because I don't want my son to ever see me allow someone to speak in a way that's offensive. Or I haven't had many, where it's just straight up racist or offensive. It's usually just more of a um, just an insensitive way to say things. I haven't seen it get more frequent as he's gotten older, and my son is 4.5 now, so he'll notice things a little bit more and he'll ask questions. I still think that the jury's out on that as far as how I'll handle that as he gets older, because I've had the luxury with him being so young that most things go right over his head anyway. So I haven't felt the need to really address it strongly. But I don't know if you all had any follow up to that.
Helping hundreds of people adopt. The irony is that it's not the Asian kids who have the racist comments for the
Mm.
most part. And there's not tension if you're a white person adopting an Asian child.
Mm.
But for white parents adopting black children, that's where the tension it is. It just flat out is.
Yeah.
And you got to be intentional about learning about what that is like and what your family considering your family. And Matthew, I'm just so proud of you for the way that you defend and you coach and you teach your family to on how to engage your own children. I mean, that's great.
Yeah. Andy, I wanted to give you a chance to answer Brandon's question about waiting. I think we'll probably have to end with this one.
Yeah.
But we got a lot of guys here that are in the home study process. I know you waited a long time. My wife and I waited about 2 years from the time we applied. That is very hard. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Brandon, I totally feel everything you have written here. Like I feel those feelings deeply. Because, in your home study process, it is an open-ended timeline for that. You don't know how long that's going to take for the waiting. For us, even too, we had an additional timeline on that of our daughter was born in a different state than we were. So, but sorry, birth mom was from a different state. She was born here. So there was getting Tennessee to talk to another state, and they not liking each other's paperwork. And like we just want to finalize, like we just want to get this done. And so it was because you feel like your life is kind of on hold until you can like make these major shifts happen, until you're matched, until you're able to finalize. So I would say you're definitely not bothering your social worker. They are the most incredible people in the world, and this is what they do. So you're probably their favorite family. They won't say that, but because you're informed, because you are in the process, you are engaged with what they're doing. You're not bothering them, so don't worry about that. But also, I hear you and I see you. I hear what you're saying. I would say to that too, find your community, because whether you're in the home study process or you are, your child's home and whatever, um, adoption, as wonderful as it can be isolating. There are moments where you may feel no one else understands what this feels like because very few will. Um, I can have conversations with Matthew and JT and people like Marty because they know what this feels like and they know those things that you walk through. But not everybody will. They may try, but they may not fully understand. So I would say find those other adoptive families around you, maybe at your church. I'll shout out a ministry that we work with called Replanted, that they provide small groups around the country for adoptive families and foster families to meet together like, once a month outside of a normal small group session to be able to just have those conversations of knowing that shared common language together. Or email one of us. I will listen to you till the cows come home about waiting and about adoption. May not have a good answer, but I'll sure listen for sure. But you are not alone in that feeling of it being long. But the payoff is absolutely worth it. I promise.
And another great thing to do during the waiting is a both hands project.
Well, on that note, we will send out some more information about both hands and other resources that we're connected with. Brandon, I saw you ask another question. Is it a conflict of interest if we were to do this with my mother-in-law who lost her husband almost 6 years ago? That we have done projects like that before. I'd put you in touch with our program team, and they can kind of walk through some of the ins and outs of that question. But feel free to reach out, and we can walk you through the specifics of how you would do that. Um, I think that's about it. Like I said, we'll send out some more resources. Anybody have anything they want to uh, close us out with? And if not, JT, I'd love for you to pray over us.
Oh,
Just have one real quick thing to tell Brandon. I think there's a couple of things that I would coach him. One is to look at his agency and just determine like how many babies do they have available compared to the number of families waiting. It could be that just mathematically he's it's going to be a longer time there. And there are options. You can hire adoption consultants who they aren't just assigned to one agency. They represent multiple agencies, and families typically get a quicker response by
Mm.
going that route.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of us here at both hands who've adopted and Marty as well, we've all kind of walked through it from different angles. Obviously, I've walked through it from the agency standpoint. We worked with Bethany for our first, and then through a consultant who ended up getting us in touch with an attorney. So there's different ways. Some of them have the pro is that you don't wait as long, but the cons are the costs are significantly higher, or the risks are significantly higher. So Brandon and whoever else might have questions about specifically who we might suggest you work with, or if you're already working with somebody and you feel like you've been waiting a long time and want some guidance there, you can email me, you can email Andy. We're happy to walk through some of those questions as well. Okay, well, it's 1:03. I want to make sure we respect everyone's time. And JT, I would love it if you would pray over us as we.
I will. Lord, thank you so much for this time we've gotten together. Thanks so much for just giving us the opportunity to even discuss adoption and model after the way we've been adopted with you. And Lord, I thank you for the men on this call, and I thank you for the women behind these men. Lord, I pray you'll bless the marriages, and I pray that this whole conversation brings a whole new light and some new information to something that's really important, Lord. Bless them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You